Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special episode of the Project Infinite podcast, the podcast covering the infinite and ever-expanding multiverse of fandom, from movies, comics, TV shows, video games. We got you covered, but for this episode and this episode alone, we got you covered for one topic and one topic only, because we just saw Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, and we came back here to talk about it. I'm Rob. I'm here, as always, with Court, and man, it was quite an experience.
It was quite an experience. It was an emotional experience, something that I'm going to think about for a while after watching this, and hats off to Ryan Coogler and team on what they were able to create, because I will say that this is definitely one of my favorite movies of the year. But again, it's such an emotionally jarring experience that just be ready for that. Be prepared.
Yeah, and that's pretty much the lay of it. But at the same time, while it is predicated on emotion, and it does, it's not a spoiler to say it is a touching tribute to Chadwick Boseman, as everyone expected, but in its own merit and on its own kind of platform, it's a very good entry into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Did a lot of interesting things as far as expanding the world, obviously with the introduction of Namor the Submariner, played by Tenoch Huerta in this. And yeah, this was, without giving anything away, one of my favorite hero ascension stories that we've gotten in the entire MCU.
No, I think that's a great way to put it. And you want to talk about the larger universe, I think this is a great expansion piece while still having the wherewithal to understand what this story uniquely has to understand on, an outside world level and an in-universe level, and something that carries a lot of weight, and something that it's got a nice flow to it too. There's a nice, beautiful, natural progression of flow, and you want to talk theme in this movie. If the first one's about succession, the second one is about how do you move on? How do you tell yourself it's okay to move on, and what do you do? And then the thing that gets added onto that is how do you do this in a sense where it's not only you're losing a brother or a son, you're also losing a king and your protector as well. And I think they handle that extremely well. Yeah,
it's a movie about legacy, and it's a movie about, like you alluded to, like this idea of moving on from loss. And it's an interesting case because it's a theme that is shared by the characters, but also it's a theme directed at the audience.
Yep.
I think as well, which is obviously intentional. This movie really, maybe even more than I expected it to, leans into the idea of kind of celebrating and then promptly letting T'Challa go. I think is, in essence, like what the theme of this movie is being comfortable in your grief and allowing yourself to mourn, and then at the same time moving on and looking to the future. And that serves as a theme both for the characters that live in Wakanda as well as the audience that's consuming the movie. I think is also where the movie's theme is kind of directed.
Yep. This is probably, I would say, maybe Ryan Coogler, this might be the best movie he's directed. It very well could be. I'm definitely going to have to watch this again, but just very early, very emotional reaction. I know the way that I like to watch movies for the first time, I like to watch it from an emotional lens, like a full vulnerability lens. I think that's the best way to kind of go about it. And then you can kind of, afterwards kind of let yourself calm down and, look at specs, look at all these different things that are supposed to make sense. But at the end of the day, and this is why it's such a unique experience, I really wasn't too worried about all of that. I just wanted to be honest, I just wanted to finally have some nice closure for losing one of my favorite actors of all time. That's really all I wanted, and it just so happened to be inside of, everybody's favorite universe that we follow so closely.
Yeah, I think it provides you that in a very successful way. Definitely handles it with incredible care and attention and love that obviously it's much deserved, and definitely a love that you can feel reverberate throughout the entire film, and no more performance than that of Letitia Wright. This is an absolutely star-making performance by her.
I agree.
She was incredible
Yeah.
in this entire movie.
Yeah, I think incredible is an understatement. I think this is one of the best performances within this universe. I personally think this is one of the better performances of the year, and I know, controversy aside, other thought processes about what happened behind the scenes aside, she gives every bit of emotion, and she's put in such a unique perspective, without spoilers in this movie of, this idea of what's going to happen now that your brother's gone, but the thing that makes this movie is the relationships between people, because it's her relationship to everybody else is what really kind of drives everything too, because it's how she's supposed to deal with the nation, how she's supposed to deal, with not having a Black Panther, and essentially she would be the next in line for succession, but just also seeing her mom lose her son, same thing. She just lost her brother. That's the true relationships that you kind of go off of. And I think that highlight is what really, pulls you in emotionally. And that's why it works so well.
Yeah, I totally agree. And she really is, we were wondering who kind of the emotional core of this movie was going to be going in. And it's her. Mm-hmm. She has so many touchstones, and like you mentioned, every other character in this movie is touched by Shuri in some way.
Yep.
Whether it's her mother,
yep.
Okoye, M'Baku, surprisingly has
Riri.
A lot of touching moments with Shuri in this. Riri Williams and then Namor also has a lot of shares a lot of time with Shuri. Like it was such a great decision by them to make her the true emotional kind of core of this story, where all the other characters revolved around. Like Shuri, we were curious as to was this going to be more of an ensemble performance? Mm-hmm. Was there going to be a true protagonist? It's Shuri. Right. Shuri is the true protagonist of this movie, and everything is viewed through her lens. They really touch upon the whole idea that she wasn't as in tone and with the ancestry mm-hmm. as the other people of Wakanda. She was much more lost in her science, and she uses that as a vehicle for her grief in this movie. Yeah,
she's so practical, and that practicality, she needs to kind of marry that with the loss of her brother too, and it's such a beautiful arc that she goes on, and one I'm going to think about for a while, especially if you're talking in this universe. You want to talk Phase 4. I think one thing that Phase 4 definitely has in its favor is the emotion. I think this phase really tackles grief heavily. It tackles, losing people very heavily. It tackles your personal demons very heavily, and this movie gets all three of those. Yeah,
I mean, it's really a really great examination of how you deal with grief. I think Shuri is a tremendous vehicle for that. Mm-hmm. There's so many times that people who have lost people are going to identify with how she perceives things. Like the whole adage of people basically, when you lose someone and people are like, well, they're in a better place, or, things are going to be okay. And Shuri just doesn't want to hear it. Like you said, she takes that scientific kind of approach to it all, where they're being gone is being gone. There's mm-hmm. nothing else after that. And you can see how she channels her grief in a variety of different mm-hmm. emotions. And that just goes back to the performance. Letitia Wright showed a ton of depth and versatility mm-hmm. that she was not granted the opportunity to show in the first Black Panther movie or in Infinity War.
Yeah, that's a great point. And the best part about that is I love the idea of this versatility, and not only in the way that it's, she's able to capture different emotions, it's the way that usually characters like that are going to be characters like that. And, they might be sad here and there, but when I talk about an arc, or when we talk about the idea of an arc, this is the idea of an arc. She's changed from the person that she was. She's just not doing things. She's actually physically, emotionally, spiritually, every way changed from how she was at the end of Endgame to right now.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. She goes on a plausible and realistic and believable character arc that you totally buy throughout the entire movie, and it really is quite a difference from how she was portrayed in Black Panther, how she was portrayed in Infinity War as this kind of snippy, quirky, quick to throw a jab at you, mm-hmm. Felt like the rain washed off her back kind mm-hmm. of thing, and then in this she has this tremendous, you can feel the tremendous amount of weight on her and the grief in her, and not quite figuring out how to navigate that grief. It's so incredible, and personally something I wasn't really expecting to be quite honest,
because by all intensive purposes, Queen Ramonda was supposed to, from the marketing, it felt like she almost was going to be, you know, the lead of the main characters, and she definitely
she's tremendous.
Spent her time in the sun. It's tough to say this is, you know, as good as Angela Bassett's ever been, because she's never been bad in her entire career, but she was just absolutely incredible in this movie. And just thinking, you know, how these people feel about what happened, she conveys that just so extraordinarily, to the point where it hurts you, like it genuinely hurts you, the idea of her perspective of what happened. It's just, she lost her husband and she lost her son all within too close to each other. She lost them twice, I believe, because I think she was alive during the snap. So all these things kind of happening to her so fast, it's not fair. It just truthfully isn't to her. And on the top of that, she needs to be a monarch at this point. She kind of takes brains back of being, you know, the Queen of Wakanda. So it's just such a tough experience to kind of hold, but I'm so appreciative that she was able to kind of capture all of that.
Yeah, I think the cast, you know, the Wakandan cast across the board it really did feel like they channeled their real life grief into this film, you know, and, you know, not spoiling anything, but like the opening, you know, 10 to 15 minutes is, you can just feel that reverberate through the entire cast as they're performing the scenes from the opening of the movie. Like it's palpable, and she carries that incredibly well. Again, another character that is, you know, pretty indistinguishable from the first time that we saw her in Black Panther. You know, again, another character that has grown and has experienced things that has changed her perception of the world and of her people too. And again, just an incredible performance by Angela Bassett also. And then just kind of moving on down the list, Danae Guerrera gets a lot more to do in this than she did in the first one, which is expected. Mm-hmm. I mean, she was kind of getting that a little bit. You saw it a little bit in Infinity War, that she was starting to kind of like get her own kind of
coming
groove.
to her own a little bit more. Yep.
And she goes on quite a journey also in this movie.
She does. You got her, you have Winston Duke as M'Baku. I love what they did with him in this movie as well. I just think it was really smart of what they did. All the decision making in this movie, I mean, in front of the camera and behind the camera, just all make sense to me. They're all great decisions, and you really feel that they put a lot of tender love and care into what they did. So Winston Duke's performance, I thought, was, you know, he still has fun, but I think he understands the gravity of what's happening. You just can't be like the fallback funny guy. It's not that simple anymore. So I like the position they put him in too. It's just, no spoilers. It's a really smart thing that they kind of do with him to, you know, keep him around a little bit.
Yeah, I think what they did, you know, across the board with all the existing characters before we get into the new ones was they just tweaked them a bit to give them a bit more nuance. Mm-hmm. And M'Baku is a great embodiment of that, because we talked about when we did our retrospective on the first Black Panther movie, how by the end of it, he is this feral kind of savage clan leader, but there's also an honor and a nobility to him that is just kind of starting to show at the end of that movie. And by the time you get to this movie, that's really doubled down on. Yeah. And he really is more of a leader than maybe he was in the first movie. Mm-hmm. And he takes on a bigger role as far as being more involved with the Wakandans. Like, the Jabari tribe is fully integrated into the Wakandan society now, and he kind of takes the spearhead of that. And it's just it's a really great nuanced performance by one of the existing cast members. And that's true across the board for really all of them. With the maybe Martin Freeman, not so much. Right.
It is. He does go on. It's not really an arc he goes on, as if more revelations for him happen, which gets really interesting. But the last person for that is Lupita Nyong'o, and I definitely, along with, I would say, Angela Bassett, I feel like Lupita Nyong'o is definitely for me the most like feeling. I'm not putting Letitia right there, because I feel like it's a little bit, you know, it's like a 1A 1B situation for her. But Lupita Nyong'o definitely, you feel how much this has affected her, you know, both herself and Nakia in the movie as well. And just, I love how they show off her skill sets too, as she's still formidable. She wasn't just, because obviously she was absent during the Infinity Wars and after, so you know that something probably happened there, but I love how this whole idea is she's not a foreigner, and even if she leaves, she's not a foreigner. And I love kind of the contention they play on a little bit between her and Shuri a little bit. They kind of, go off that because she was absent for a lot of this too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. And, going back to Martin Freeman, you're right that his performance is more, and his character at this point, Agent Ross, is more of him reconciling with but extending more his relationship that he established with all of them at the end of the first Black Panther movie.
Essentially his debt that he owes.
Yeah.
Truthfully, because he sees these people as, not how the outside world sees them. He sees these people as, this beautiful land with these beautiful people that saved his life and that are good people. They're not these savages that Claw would call them, or they're not these, they kind of are recluse, but not by, not by kind of chance, but by choice, because they need to be. And this movie explores that a lot, that they do need to be, away from everybody as well. I know in the trailers, Lake Bell's character and kind of her team, I'm not going to say what they were doing, but you do understand that they need to be away from everybody very, very abruptly. That's actually a big stepstone in this movie.
Yeah, there's a lot of unintended repercussions in this movie of T'Challa's decision to open up Wakanda to the world and do these outreaches and share their knowledge and resources with the world. There are repercussions for that come through as the kind of B plot of this movie that lead into the A plot.
Right.
And then speaking of the A plot, we have two newcomers, obviously, to this cast in Dominique Thorne and Tenoch Huerta.
Also Michaela Cole.
Yes, yep. And Michaela Cole. But Dominique Thorne and Tenoch Huerta are obviously the two most intriguing additions to the MCU in the form of Riri Williams and Namor the Submariner. And I thought both of them were good. And in Tenoch Huerta's case, really great.
Yeah. Let's start with Riri, because I want to save a lot of time, because Namor obviously is the other side to this kingship role, but this infusion of fun and life, and you just got to think that it's an extension of what you talked about last week, of this, or earlier in the week when we talked about Black Panther 1 and the end of that movie kind of being one of your favorite moments, where that kid looks at T'Challa and T'Challa just gives that little smirk. It's got to be an extension of that, like, that our people don't need to be, kind of stereotype that can be like, the smartest girl on this campus is her right away. And she does have, I'm still kind of iffy on how I feel about her, how they got her to be in the movie. It's one of those things, and it'll probably take me a rewatch to really think about it, but besides the point, Dominic, she was great in my opinion. I thought she was fun. You right away understand why she's going to get her own show too. That's probably the biggest compliment that I'll say, is she could definitely carry her own show, and you throw the right cast of characters around her, probably the same way that Miss Marvel handles the Khan family and all of her friends as well in her community. I think that's going to be a big stepping stone for Ironheart. But man, Tenoch Huerta, probably outside of Letitia Wright's performance, I think this was probably my favorite in the movie. It's just crazy because you watch interviews with Tenoch Huerta, he just seems like this like funny guy with this big heart, but always cold, ever so cold. Like he really gets the best of both worlds. He really gets that comic Namor. Comic Namor is just, he's so cold, and he's just, I wouldn't say he's not as calculated as somebody like Doctor Doom, but he's just he's like he's the antithesis to T'Challa. He's just like, I will kill anybody for, like, T'Challa's got the same thing, and Shuri's got the same thing, but he's very much of like, he's more of like a savage ruler in that way of just, war, any step out of line, I'm a warmonger at the end of the day. And I think he captures that really well. And then the inclusion of the Talokanian and kind of doing it that way. Oh, it was so beautifully done in my opinion, and very tasteful, and there's a lot of emotion that comes through that too. Yeah, and going back to Riri Williams for a second before I talk about Namor. I agree basically with what you said, and it was the one thing that I alluded to
last episode that I wasn't worried about, but I was the most curious about, was how was she going to be inserted into the story in a way that made sense. And it does make sense, but at the same time, it still does kind of feel like, hey, this is the next character that we need to establish, so we're going to put her in this thing. Mm-hmm. Like, there is still kind of an element of that. Like, there's a ton to that character that's left on the floor that isn't explained, and obviously it's because we're going to get that stuff explained to us in the Ironheart series. And, I mean, don't get me wrong, I was glad that she was in this movie. It does kind of come across as like, hey, we need to introduce this person, so she's in this thing now. And, it doesn't take away from the movie at all, because she's great, and the sequences by which she encounters our main cast of characters is really good, and she fits quite neatly into the core plot of the story. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I guess it does do its job in the sense that, like, I do want to see kind of her story expanded upon. Yeah,
for me, it was more of like her character is kind of like the through line of the first movie, like the outreach type of thing. Like, that's the way I took it, is just like, look what Wakanda has done for the world in empowering all these people. That's what I took from that.
Yeah. I guess I just wish that would have been kind of put in, like, not explained a little more, but shown a little more that she was kind of inspired by that. Like, there's a little bit of reference to it, I suppose, in terms of her reverence for certain things, but it's, a lot about her is still unclear. So I do look forward to seeing more of her. But man, Tenoch Namor is just, he's magnetic. Yeah. And it's a great decision by them to infuse Namor with the Talokan culture, because
so smart.
It serves as a kind of segregationist piece on two fronts. Yep. So there's obviously the divide between him being, a submariner and a man of the water against the surface world, but then it also doubles down with the idea of the conquistadors kind of conquering, the Aztec culture and the Mayan culture. So really he's kind of affronted upon on two different fronts of his life, where, his people were land dwellers, they were pushed away and conquered by the Spanish conquistadors, and then as a underwater dweller, he felt kind of oppressed in a similar way, insofar as, like, his people couldn't live on the surface world, and at the same time, like, he wouldn't want them to, because of how it's very, Killmonger-esque in how Killmonger saw the world. Like, he doesn't want to, why would he try to make peace with the people that tried to put his people in chains? It's the same philosophy, essentially, but Namor has an entire kingdom at his back, and whereas Killmonger obviously could never quite get the entire Wakandan kingdom under his control, Namor is, it's in the trailers where he's referred to as a god. Right.
And, maybe I wanted them to lead into that idea a little bit more. I think maybe this movie could have spent a little bit more time with Namor in the show don't tell type of way, and kind of, we get our flashbacks, but I maybe wanted a little bit more of like a showing of, because they display his power set very well, and I'll get into that in a second, but maybe just a little bit more into that lore, just a little bit of like how they view Namor a little bit more, because you kind of get told, and it's very quick. It's like literally, I think, like one sentence you get told, and then it's over, like how they view Namor. But I mean, I guess it's just because, like, after Thor: Love and Thunder, maybe I wanted a little bit more of that, like an exploration to, like, do these people genuinely think he is like the Serpent God, or like do they know he's just a half human, half Talokanian?
Right. Yeah, and I think it's because of, it's one of those things where, like, he's so revered by his people that, and he can do things that they can't do, that they must perceive him as something other than themselves, and in the case of, like, ancestral cultures like that, when someone that is above your people is perceived as other than, the next logical conclusion they jump to is this person is some type of deity. So, in that respect, it makes sense to me that that's how they would perceive him, regardless as if they know or not. They just know that he has led them to great prosperity, and he is different than them, and he is stronger than them, and to them that's enough to be a deity worth worshipping.
Right, and I love the control he has over them, and I don't mean control in a dictator way. I mean the control and influence he has. Yeah, he truly is. He is above them, but it's he's got this aura that fits around the entirety of his nation. Like, it's somebody that they listen to. That's why he's such a great contemporary to go against the Black Panther and whoever.
Because it's not unlike the hold that T'Challa had over Wakanda.
Right,
like,
right.
It's the same type of reverence. Like, they trust him with their lives.
Right. Because he can do more, and they do lean into that a little bit in this movie of doing more and being, you know, not only the king of your nation, but also the protector of your nation.
Yeah, and like you were saying about his power set, he's immediately established as a threat.
Yeah,
a very credible threat.
Yep. I mean, I'm talking on the par of you look at your top, and not counting like people like Doctor Strange and Wanda because they use different means, but I'm talking raw strength. I'm talking like Thor and Hulk. Like, that's kind of how they did his approach, which is something I kind of enjoyed that.
And capable.
And capable, yes. He's not some bumbling, like, you know, stumbles into his feet or anything like that.
His winged feet.
His winged feet. Man, his power set is so... They killed it in the way they went about, you know, displaying how strong he is, and his movements are so clean. It's shot very well. I hope Phase 5 takes cues from this of, you know, how to display your villains and kind of, you know, even your heroes, but like how they use their powers. I think this is one of the best examples of like a character that might be tough to display. Like Makari from the Eternals also has this, like, how do you display something like that? Characters that can fly and that can control water, like, you got to get a little creative with it, and I think they did a great job. I never thought Namor could work in, you know, a guy with small wings on his feet and, like, green spandex.
He uses those wings, boy.
Yeah, he does. Yes, he does.
Yeah, it was real... And this is kind of where it was cool to kind of have him and have Ironheart in the same movie because they both fly, but they do it in different ways. Like, she's obviously, like, from the Iron Man mold of, like, you know, she's got the boosters and and it's, like, kind of like a rocket flying around.
Right.
Him is, like, almost like a speedster. Like, he's almost like running on air.
Yeah, yep. Physically, like, he's like stepping on the air to kind of get some.
And the
propulsion.
way the way he's able to use his legs and kind of like do these like quick drift turns in the air to like change his direction of momentum is, like you said, it's a great display of his powers, which, you know, I didn't think I'd be telling this in a Black Adam, but I thought Black Adam did that really well.
Right.
Of kind of just having these superpowered people do superpowered things.
Yeah.
And that's what Wakanda Forever does with Namor. Like, they just let him do superhero things.
Right.
You know, and kind of just let him loose.
Right.
And I think it's for the better. I think, once again, this franchise has done an upper echelon antagonist, you know. I think he's right up there with Killmonger, to be honest with you, as far as Black Panther antagonist, as far as MCU antagonists.
Yep, I
I
agree.
think he's right up there. He's layered. He's three-dimensional. He's making some points.
He is making some points. He's making some really good points. This movie looks great. I think this movie is probably one of the better looking movies that they've done. And again, that just goes to understanding the level of care that you need to approach. And I said this afterwards, and I know the circumstances were different on why they needed to take so much time to do this, and that they weren't going to leave any stone unturned. Like, everybody was going to be on their A game. They were going to make this look the best. I'm talking in terms of practicality, how you shoot a movie. But I think Marvel, and it's funny that this is the last movie of Phase 4, and I guess we'll probably talk about Phase 4, the larger at the very end, but I hope they take some cues from this and understand, like, why not take this approach to every movie? Like, why, you're the biggest movie franchise of all time with the biggest actors and the biggest budgets, so why are we not taking this approach every time? Like, give your VFX artists some time to operate. Get some directors that are, you know, directors on their own with credibility already, not just people that, you know, because these are big, gigantic movies. Like, sometimes these directors come in and they're overwhelmed by what you're trying to throw at them right away. So I hope that they kind of take a cue from this and the talent that they seek. And my hot take when we inevitably rank these movies at the very end, because we thought that would be fun seeing this as the last Phase 4 movie. Man, get some directors that kind of can have a hold and control over what they're doing and what the experience is like. I think Sam Raimi did that with Doctor Strange 2. I think Chloe Zhao did that with the Eternals. I think James Gunn does that with the Guardians of the Galaxy movies really well, and we're going to see a little bit in a couple months. And I think the last one on that list is Ryan Coogler, does that extremely well.
Yeah, Ryan Coogler just gets what he had to get in this movie and every other movie he's done, which is that I told you before, he's only directed 4 films in his career, and each time the genres, besides obviously the 2 Black Panther movies are lumped together, but each of his movies has covered a different genre, and each time he's able to get to the emotional core of each of those films, whether it's Fruitvale Station, which is a contemporary, realistic kind of grounded piece, or whether it's Creed, which is contemporary, but also kind of like this kind of fictional world, like obviously the Rocky universe is people who don't do normal human things, but he still finds the emotional core of that. And then obviously we talked about Black Panther, and then in this also just able to again reach to the emotional core, tether the people to the world, tether the people to the audience, and it shows in another just fantastic entry into Ryan Coogler's career as a director.
You got Ludwig Göransson on the score, and I've been hearing rumblings that, you know, the first score is better than the second score. I just think it's different. I think the approach it needs to be different. You can't have the same exact type of score, and because the one thing about the first Black Panther score was the gravitas of the situation. It was very booming, but there was a lot of beauty behind the boom. This one had to have a lot of subtlety, and this one, you know what it does? It gives you a time to breathe. There's a lot of, you know, melancholy notes and a lot of just, you know, null and numb moments in the score, and I appreciate that a lot because it gives you time to feel. It gives you time to kind of feel and have it be a backdrop instead of the thing that's kind of carrying your emotion. It's, I think, a great decision that Ludwig Göransson and the approach to not kind of try to overpower the story, but try to subtly enhance it.
Yeah, and again, it's in the trailer, so we know that there is a new Black Panther, but one particular musical beat that sticks out to me is when there is the emergence of the new Black Panther, that it's such a tremendous contrast from the score throughout the movie, which is very subdued for the most part and very kind of mournful. And then once the emergence of the new Black Panther happens, the score flips to this kind of triumphant score that is just like was seared into my mind like while we were watching the movie. Like that piece of music is probably gonna, like, in 10 years time when we do our film retrospective on this movie, that's gonna be, I think, my musical moment is that particular moment.
Yeah, that's a good one. And Rihanna and Thames also, their soundtrack to this movie, a lot more emotional than Kendrick Lamar's. It's a lot more understanding the situation that happened, and I think all the music, and then just adding the Mexican culture into there too. There's a lot of great songs in there as well, that especially when they first go into Talacon, there's a really great song that plays in there too, and during that flashback sequence as well. So it's really well structured, and hats off to kind of the way they built this movie. Yeah,
and really can't wait to talk about it. More in depth with more spoilers involved, and Yep. So this is the end of Phase 4. So we are 30 movies in. This was the 30th MCU movie, which is just insane. We talk about it all the time. You have everybody's apparently got their problems with Phase 4, and some of them are credible. I won't ever say that that's not true in my opinion, but some of them might be a little harsh. It's the single greatest universe that's ever been built and put to film. There's no if, and, or but about it. It's one of the greatest cinematic achievements of all time.
That will never happen ever again.
Many have tried.
It's never going to happen again. Just cohesiveness. And I'm always in awe of it. Like I said, as much, you can nitpick or, give valid criticisms. That's good. It's great even. But at the end of the day, this is just something that's just, you gotta step back sometimes and be like, wow, like this is kind of insane that they're still going and that we're about to reach Phase 5 and, now we're getting into the nitty gritty of the multiverse saga. So we thought it'd be fitting to rank every single last one of these 30 movies.
Yeah.
I guess how we can do this is maybe do 10 at a time and do the bottom 10, 21 through 30 and then 11 through 20 and then 1 through 10.
Yeah, that's fair. You want to go first?
I wanted you to go first.
Oh, you wanted me to go first?
You know what? I'll go first.
All right, you go first.
Sure. So my last spot is, I guess we could do 5 at a time.
We'll just do 5 at a time, yeah.
So Thor 2 is at the bottom. We've already said why. Don't really want to harp on it too much. It's probably the most just, you know, it was in that era of Marvel where it's just like they started coming out more frequently and frequently. And then I think this got caught in the crosshairs of just like, we need to pump out another Thor movie. There wasn't any life into that Thor franchise. Apparently Chris Hemsworth wasn't having any fun playing Thor, and it's just right there with just something. Like I said, it's not that it's like a horrible movie. It's just a movie that has no life in it. There's just absolutely no life. You've got maybe one scene of life with Loki throwing some chairs in a cell, and that's probably it. But besides that, there's just no life in that movie. Number 29, I'd probably put The Incredible Hulk. I don't know. I feel I've probably got to shotgun these a little faster, but there's some cool bits in that movie, but it just doesn't feel, you know, it's Universal versus the MCU at that point in Disney, but yeah, it's fine. It's nothing to really, you know, get excited over or anything like that. Number 28 is the first Thor movie. This revisionist history that somehow this movie just turned out to be incredible will forever be insane to me. It's just insane and crazy. But again, same thing. It's got a little bit more life. There's some cool moments. I think Kenneth Branagh does a pretty cool job on it. But again, it's like a no harm, no foul. Like, there's nothing crazy. You just got to get Thor to get ready for the Avengers. Captain Marvel's 27. This is crazy to say. I feel like there's a movie trapped within that movie, and that movie also did come out in a tough spot, being in between Infinity War and Endgame as well. And she needed to be built as this ex machina that can do everything for them. And in my opinion, that's just not how you set up a character. That's just you're treading thin ice if you do that, because what you can have a good thing to go off of, or you can have what we got with Captain Marvel, and it's just somebody that doesn't have a lot of soul. And I think they put too much investment into what she could do versus the actual person of Carol Danvers. Mm-hmm. And then number 26 is Thor: Love and Thunder. Since June or July to now, that movie's it's gotten worse and worse for me, and it's not a movie I'd like to go back and watch, because again, there's just not a lot of flow or soul to that movie. I just think I didn't even feel that much when Natalie Portman died in that movie, which kind of stinks. So I just don't feel a lot as I should for that movie.
Yeah. So our bottom fives look quite different, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So I do have Thor: The Dark World in that bottom spot. It's just a whole lot of nothing to me. The villain is inherently forgettable.
Yep.
I just don't like it. 29 for me is Black Widow. I think this movie could have been higher had it come out in a more timely time. I think Florence Pugh is great.
Yep. That's why I have that movie a little higher, is that.
But unfortunately, that alone is not enough for me. I have not gone back to that movie since I've seen it, and that's a big red flag for me, because I do rewatch movies quite frequently. 28 is Captain Marvel. I'm not going to retread much of the things that you said, but again, just another thing I penalize these movies pretty heavily for being forgettable, and Captain Marvel's another one that's most of the plot is inherently forgettable for me. Totally kind of wastes Jude Law as a villain.
I agree so much on that. 100%.
27, I have Ant-Man and the Wasp here.
Okay.
It's fine, but again, just Ghost was not that memorable to me. I think she'll actually be better in the Thunderbolts when she returns.
Do we know who's directing the Thunderbolts or not yet?
Not yet. So yeah, Ant-Man and the Wasp 27, and then I have Iron Man 3 26. Just didn't like it. Just the Mandarin thing, I just can't get over it. Aldrich Killian is not a good villain. It does some interesting things with Tony as far as like the PTSD, but then it's quickly kind of glossed over. And then, at the end of the day, like there's a lot of questionable character choices that Tony makes in Iron Man 3 that are pretty nullified by the time you get to Age of Ultron and by the time you get to Civil War, where like he stopped being Iron Man, but then he never really stopped being Iron Man.
It's really jarring once you hit Age of Ultron, because it's everything that Iron Man 3 just gets undone, essentially.
Yeah. So then, and then I guess I'll just keep going.
Go ahead, man. We'll snake draft this thing.
Yeah, so 25 of The Incredible Hulk. I think Ed Norton is pretty good. I think that movie is not quite as bad as some people say it is. 20, hang on, because I did these out of order. I have 24 somewhere, I just don't know where it is. Oh, Thor 1. Thor 1 is 24. All the things that you said, I do quite like the fish out of water story that it tells. Yeah. I think he does the the dry humor pretty well in that movie. I think that's pretty good. I like this idea that he's this kind of like entitled prince. And then 23, I'm back to back in it with Thor movies. Thor: Love and Thunder is down here. I rewatched it a while ago. I still quite like the second half of that movie. I think Christian Bale is really great.
Yep.
Definitely a redeeming feature for me is if you have a memorable villain, and that's a memorable villain. So Thor: Love and Thunder is there. 22, I have Ant-Man 1. It's fun. It's a nice little fun little heist movie. Darren Cross is fine as a villain. It's pretty typical, but it's not inherently bad. So I have it there. I mean, once you get into these like 20s and mid-teens, like a lot of these movies for me were pretty interchangeable.
Yep, I agree 100%.
And then 21 to kind of round out this next group of 5 is Iron Man 2. I think it's a pretty, neat sequel to the first Iron Man movie, but you're going to see where I have this first Iron Man movie ranked, and that's going to also explain why I have Iron Man 2 ranked so low, because it doesn't quite hit the highs of the first one. Mickey Rourke is a decent villain.
I think it's just for Mickey Rourke, he's just confusing as a villain. Like, it's just, they had something that I thought, because if Iron Man 1 was about, this idea of, taking the mantle and, turning from, this warmonger or this, or an ironmonger into an Iron Man and like a good man, Iron Man 2 could have, it was supposed to deal with like the sins of the father a little bit, and kind of, that you had this power, but you took this from somebody else. Like, I think that could have, they explored it, but it didn't really land any time. So 25, I have Iron Man 3. Oh, same reasons you said. It's such a departure. And you know what I think about Iron Man 3? I'll double down on the Black Widow thing. I think there's a Shane Black movie that's trapped inside this. You know what it is? It's trapped inside this Disney movie, because this was the first Disney movie that Marvel ever made. And you feel it a lot. I think they got a little better at, telling, Bob Iger, not that, he would, care or anything at this time, but like, back off a little bit. We're going to try to make our own things. But again, the Disney piece of this kind of killed. And this is the example of, which a lot of people have problems with, like, the toy thing is a big piece of why this movie didn't work. And it's crazy that I'm even saying this. Like, they didn't want to market a woman as the main villain of this movie, so you just usurp the entire Mandarin thing. And because even if you do that, but you have, I forget who it was supposed to be, I forget what her name is, but yeah, his ex-girlfriend was supposed to be the Mandarin and the main villain of this movie, but you just don't do that because you didn't think boys were going to buy a female or a woman character's toy, and that's just really disgusting in my opinion and really crappy. So, and again, that Mandarin thing just doesn't make sense. A lot of the character choices don't make sense, but it's still fun. I had fun with that movie. It's a nice, I watched that movie around Christmas time because it's a backdoor Christmas movie. Robert Downey Jr., I think he's great in that movie too. There's some cool ideas around that movie too. And like I said, the biggest thing for me is I think there's a Shane Black movie in there. I agree. I have Black Widow above that. I understand every single criticism with Black Widow. I still think the action's pretty tight. Regardless of how I feel about Taskmaster, Florence Pugh is just... she was the perfect get. She was like 24, and you can have her own franchise, and she would carry it and lead it. She's one of the new age movie stars right now, so that alone. And then I think Scarlett Johansson probably gives the best performance that she gave in this movie too. I think she's great. She's emotional. You finally feel a round out. This movie just came out at the wrong time. I think that's the biggest gripe I have with this. Ant-Man and the Wasp I have at 23. You've said everything you can. Like, it's a fun movie on a little bit of a bigger scale. You're adding Evangeline Lilly finally in suit as the Wasp, but again, villain that's kind of forgettable. And then your B villains are extremely just useless in this movie. They don't need to.
With those guys.
Yeah, you do not need to be in this movie. The comedic friend group, again, they just don't work too much as they did, because the first movie they were forgivable and lovable and laughable, but this movie you're investing a lot of the plot into them and it's just not working too much. Number 22, I have Ant-Man, so same thing. I just had a little higher. Fun heist movie. It's cool. I had a lot of fun. And it's your introduction to Scott Lang. And I guess it's for both these Ant-Man movies. The only thing I don't like about about Scott Lang is he's this bumbling idiot, but he's never kind of learned from it. Like I don't think I don't think he's got to the point where like he's like, formidable. Like I don't ever feel that from him. I just feel like he stumbles into doing everything that he's doing.
In Civil War, he's weirdly formidable in the airport fight.
Sure. And then he's just not again once you get to Ant-Man and the Wasp, which is just weird. So, and then number 21, I have Iron Man 2.
Oh, so our bottom 10 are the same. They're just not in the same order. So
right.
I think it's the same set of movies,
right.
just in different orders.
The hot take I have about Iron Man 2 is that it's not too different. Like the tone feels the same. Like all those things feel the same. It's just the decision making in this movie. Like in front of the camera and behind the camera, some of them I just don't understand, but I quite like that third act fight. I think it's one of the better third act fights in this entire MCU. I think it's it's big and it's loud, but it's pretty well done. I think the CGI was actually pretty cool. That garden sequence where it's Iron Man and War Machine, and then you get Don Cheadle, which is cool. So yeah. And that's it. And I guess I'll keep going.
Yep, snake through. 20 to 16.
16 through 20. I have Spider-Man Far From Home. Again, upon rewatch, the third act is you get a lot of really memorable moments within this like really broad and insane third act, and I do like the idea of taking Spider-Man out of New York, and I guess nobody else found that cool. But I mean, Jake Gyllenhaal I think is great. It's one of the best villains in the MCU in my opinion. But again, I think people are trying to say Iron Man or Homecoming has like the Iron Boy Jr. thing. This movie has it really bad, and I'm not a fan of griping that because a lot of people do, but you can really feel it here to the point where the middle chunk of that movie gets so overwhelmed by that too. Then you get to the Captain America First Avenger. War movie, cool war movie in the first phase. Chris Evans he's not the Human Torch anymore. He's serious. I think Red Skull, Hugo Weaving's a really cool villain. I hope Hugo Weaving comes back. I would really, really much enjoy that a lot. There's good moments in that movie. I think that movie's really touching at some points too. I love his relationship with Peggy. So agreed. I think that it's like one of those examples of a good starting off point. It doesn't have to do anything
good
overwhelming.
Origin story, yep.
But I think it's a good origin story. 18 is Multiverse of Madness. One day we're gonna do our favorite Marvel movies in order, because I think we tried to do what we think is like the worst to the best, but I think one day we should do our favorites, because I think Doctor Strange 2 would easily be in my top 10 to 5, because Sam Raimi directs the heck out of this movie. We talked about how much we kind of liked Wanda's arc, and as some things maybe didn't make too much sense, and the middle of this movie is where this movie extremely struggles.
Hurts this movie a lot.
Yeah,
I think if this movie hit a good second act, I think it's way, way higher.
Is this movie better if you take out the whole Illuminati thing and just have more Wanda just going crazy? I think this movie is way better. So yeah, you get the introduction of America Chavez. Xochitl Gomez is great. But again, Benedict Cumberbatch is one of the best gets that this universe has, and I think he was amazing in this movie. Age of Ultron is 17. I quite like this movie to the point, again, if we were to do our favorite movies, this again would probably be in my top 10. It's just something about this movie. It doubles down on the seriousness of what the first Avengers movie brought. Ultron is a clear and present danger. Again, it's the approach you take, because you're not going to get James Spader and then just go do like Earth's Mightiest Hero version of Ultron where it's just like a robot talking like a robot. Like, you're not going to do that. You're going to let James Spader be James Spader. I think it's a little bit more of a philosophical tale than people give it credit for too. It's like, it's questioning the idea of the Avengers through Ultron too. So I wish it spent a little bit more time than that, than trying to set up every single other last thing under the sun. I think that movie would have helped a little bit better. And then 16 is Spider-Man Homecoming. I quite love this movie a lot. I do think that John Watts is a pretty cool director. I genuinely think that. And there's just small moments. It's him. It's the grandeur of understanding that this is the first full movie for Spider-Man in this already grand universe that you were 15 movies into when you got here. It's a fun time, man. It's really small in scope, which I love. Like, I don't think it's as big in scope as people think. I think it's just a smaller movie where, Peter Parker can go against, Adrian Toomes. And there's a lot of cool scenes in this movie. I think scene to scene in this movie, there's a lot of great things that happen. Like that sequence where he's driving in the car with Adrian is great. I quite like the last fight in this movie too. I think it's really personal. I think that's the best thing I could say about Homecoming. This movie feels really personal.
I agree. We have 3 of the same movies in this chunk, and then you have Spider-Man and Ultron that I have elevated in the next tier. So number 20, I have Captain America: The First Avenger. It's a pretty good origin story. It is for, according to my list, it is the second best Phase 1 movie outside of the Avengers. So the second best solo movie in Phase 1 to me. It's really good. I love the relationship between Steve and Peggy. You know me quite well to know that Captain America is my favorite character in the MCU. So, 20 for the first Captain America film. 19, I have Doctor Strange 1. I think we both have agreed that this movie is one of those movies that is better the second time around than it is the first time. 18, by proxy, I have Multiverse of Madness, because I think that movie is better than the first Doctor Strange movie. I think Doctor Strange is more Doctor Strangey in this one, obviously, because he's more experienced, and Elizabeth Olsen gives a really transcendent performance that the first Doctor Strange movie doesn't quite have.
Right. That's a fair point. 17,
I have Spider-Man: Far From Home. It's fine. Again, it's a good entry. I don't have it quite high as ranked as Homecoming, which I'll get to in the next tier. And then 16, I have The Eternals. So, I do quite like this movie. I think however many months ago, this probably honestly would have been lower. And then I've really come around on it in recent months. I like what Chloe Zhao did. I quite like a lot of the performances. I like, it looks great. I think that's something that we've taken for granted in these movies about how, especially in Phase 4, considering the visual VFX qualities of other Phase 4 films. So that rounds out my 20 through 16, and then we're going to snake through. So 15, I have Avengers: Age of Ultron. So you're going to see some familiar names from this list. James Spader, again, tremendous performance, tremendous villain. The first time you really get to see the Avengers do some avenging together.
Right, that's what I think I really like that about this movie is it's the idea if I were to pick up a comic and open it, I really do feel like that would be a version of the Avengers going on a mission. I like that. Surprisingly
good Hawkeye performance in this movie. Really the start of Jeremy Renner's, really the start of his run as a pretty good addition to the MCU, whereas he's pretty forgettable in Avengers, and then he's nothing more than a cameo in the first Thor movie. So that would be 15. 14, I have Spider-Man: Homecoming. Welcome back to the MCU Spider-Man. Tom Holland establishes himself as a great Spider-Man. Michael Keaton is tremendous. Y'all must have forgot from Michael Keaton.
Yeah.
He's really good. Good performance from RDJ, as he's the MCU veteran at this point. So I really like that one. 13, I have the first Avengers movie. We thought this would be as good as it gets. We had no idea how transcendent the MCU would become. We thought just seeing Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, and the Hulk together on screen doing a thing is going to be blow people's minds. And then little did we know what we would get much, much later on. So the Avengers is in my 13 spot. 12, if I can find it. Why can I not find it? Oh, Spider-Man: No Way Home. That might be a hot take. That might be controversial to have this movie outside my top 10. But that first half, we talked about it, is pretty, not rough, but it definitely doesn't match the highs of highs.
I agree so much on that.
So it's a little disjointed. Willem Dafoe obviously puts in just a Hall of Fame worthy performance. Even though he's not an MCU villain, he established himself as one of the MCU's great villains. And we've spoken the praises of one Mr. Andrew Garfield plenty of times. He's in the movie?
Oh,
He's
wow.
in the movie. They're in the movie, ladies and
Spoilers.
gentlemen. They're in. And then obviously the ending with him and MJ is very touching.
Yes.
And
you
then,
know what I love about that? And I thought about this. Why it works so well is that she was very much so affected by him to the point she's not wearing all black anymore. She just feels much more of a regular person than just so dark and brooding. That's got to be an effect of him. I really appreciate that about their
and
relationship.
then I really liked the backdoor element that this is Spider-Man's origin story.
Yes.
And then number 11, I have Shang-Chi. So one of the shining stars of Phase 4 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Shang-Chi presents one of the MCU's most emotionally complex villains in Wen Wu, aka the real Mandarin. Simu Liu is tremendous. Aquafina is one of the first comedic side friend characters that actually kind of ascends to like quasi heroism. So I think it gets points for that. It's the action is obviously stellar. I even think maybe the action could have left even a little more left to be desired, to be honest with you. I think the action could have even been better than it actually was, and a couple really great action sequences. The bus sequence is pretty immortal. I really like the Death Dealer fight in the beginning of the movie. And then, just the third act is a little clunky. It gets a little kind of CGI-ish for my liking. I liked it, but I really was hoping for and anticipating a really slick action sequence between Shang-Chi and his father, and that we never quite got. So, 11's a good place to be. It's just outside of the top 10, so it's really great. It's in the better third of Marvel movies, so I don't think that's the worst place to put it.
Nah, not at all. 15, I have Doctor Strange. I love what Scott Derrickson did on that movie. I was one of those people that was kind of upset that he left Doctor Strange 2, because I know Scott Derrickson is very much of... I thought he was going to ascend to the ranks of, like, how Chloe Zhao approached and how Ryan Coogler approaches and how James Gunn approaches, like, a full understanding of this character and what he's able to do. So I quite like that first Doctor Strange movie. It is, in my opinion, it took... Another movie took it over as the most underrated movie in this universe, but before that, this was, my opinion, by far the most underrated movie in this universe. I think it's really, there's a lot of subtleties, there's a lot of grace in this movie too that I really appreciate. Benedict Cumberbatch is great. Tilda Swinton is really good, and it's the most creative ending to any of these movies also, and that's why I think it's the most underrated, because people were talking about that ending for like weeks of like, there wasn't a big CGI, there was a big CGI thing, but it was a big CGI fight at the end, which is kind of cool. 14, I have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I just rewatched this like 3 weeks ago, a month ago. I like this movie so much better than I thought I did. I truthfully hadn't watched that movie in like years, and then I watched it a month ago, and man, it's the same thing as like Iron Man 1 and 2. I thought it was so much different, but it's not. It's it's the same emotion. Instead of the friend ascension, it's the family ascension to this one. Kurt Russell is a great addition to this cast in terms of like this era look at these characters. I think is really cool. And yeah, just scoping out the broader MCU, I think this is a good addition to it too. A lot of great teases in there too. Number 13, I have the first Avengers movie again.
In the same exact spot that I had it.
We have two of these movies in the same spot. Who the heck thought that we were ever going to get something like this at the time? I remember sitting in that theater for the first Avengers movie, just in full out euphoria. That circle shot of the six of them is just absolutely awesome. The third act is insane. I love this movie a lot, and it's just really cool. You made a great point that this might be the best Iron Man movie. And yeah, it's why this universe works, all comes to the head in the Avengers of just the understanding of world building, while still having, your characters need a plot in a movie, and Loki, Tom Hiddleston is the perfect way to kind of do that. Use one of them as the villain for this, and, different things around. I still like the days where S.H.I.E.L.D. was around, man. I hope they bring S.H.I.E.L.D. back. And number 12, I have Spider-Man No Way Home. We've talked about this movie to death, so I'm not going to go farther. It fell a little bit, and it's that first half. There's some decently cool moments in the first half, but it just feels like two different movies from the first half to the second half. And my other big gripe, and I've talked about it, is those moments that we love so much, they don't feel as great as they did. Obviously, the three of them swinging together, yes, it does hit that same note. People, I guess, think that it beats the Endgame moment. I don't think anything ever will beat that Endgame moment in the history of the movies. But yeah, it's still cool. But again, the best part of this movie, in my opinion, is the ending. I felt like I felt to the point of like, you know, full out just happiness watching him in the end, and just understanding of and sadness too of what he's had to go through. But you know, there's just such triumph at the end. That final swing just sticks in my mind. I think it's the crowning achievement of what John Watts has done with that trilogy. And again, Andrew Garfield is just incredible, absolutely incredible.
Goddamn eels.
Gotta watch where you're falling, man. And number 11, I wanted to put this movie so much higher, and I should have just done it.
The Eternals?
Yeah. You know what? I'm going to do it. Number 11 is Thor Ragnarok. I'm doing an in-moment switch. This movie, it slaps. This movie just slaps, and it's a great attention by the studio, and to go get a director that you can, you know, breathe some life into what you're doing, because the Thor movies have had a bad track record. Thor, this God of Thunder, just felt very one-dimensional. You know, he already learned his lesson from Thor 1. Thor 2 is a whole lot of nothing. And now you're on Thor 3. Let's have some fun. Inject some comedy. And this is the future of what Chris Hemsworth does. And unfortunately, it doubled down a little too hard by the time you get to Thor Love and Thunder. But this movie set the stage for how I think Thor should operate. Like, there is a lot of seriousness. And I think the best handling of Thor, in my opinion, was by the Russo brothers. Maybe the Russo brothers should just do a Thor movie. Because I think they understand the balance between comedy and, you know, what comes with being the God of Thunder, and the character that
Prince of
brings.
Asgard.
And the Prince of Asgard, yes. I think they understand that really well. So yeah, that's my 11. I get to keep going. You know what, man? I'm doubling down again, because I think this movie I think it's real good. So next spot, I'm gonna have Shang-Chi at 10 instead.
Oh no!
If I were to put the Eternals one spot ahead, I would have never been able. I would have been ostracized by the community. So number 10, I got Shang-Chi. Man, this movie's so cool. This movie's just absolutely cool. I'm going to actually reverse what you said about the third act. I think this is the most forgivable big CGI third act in the entire MCU. Because it's the way it's handled. There's just this beauty about their culture that I really love, and I think that's really cool in the third act. You know, the thing that kind of throws me off in the third act is that Razor Fist is there. If like you remove Razor Fist, it's like a little bit more credible. But all jokes aside, I think that movie's so awesome. Especially in a Phase 4 where people were getting a little tired. It was such a breath of fresh air. And I can't wait to see what Daniel Destin Cretton does with Kang Dynasty, because I think he directed the heck out of this movie and understands this universe very well.
Agreed.
And it's time.
It's done climbing.
At number 8, right? 8?
9.
At number 9, I have The Eternals.
No, wait. Yeah, 9.
Yep, number 9, I have The Eternals. I wanted to put this movie a little bit higher. I think this is the single most underrated movie in this universe. I think this movie is directed absolutely incredibly by Chloe Zhao. I love the performances in this movie, and the best part of this movie, and this is me being biased, because I think you and everybody knows kind of how I like to consume my stories. Obviously, it's character driven, but I like the ideals, and I like the philosophical debates that we can have from these, and the intricacies of what this universe can be, and like, you know, how it can kind of weave through each other. And I think that's the best part about this movie. Like, the introduction of the Celestials, I think, is handled really well. And you know, you have other characters like Dane Whitman, and you know, characters like that bring the other characters down to life. The decision, I think, I mean, there's reasons I think people don't like this movie and are very harsh on this movie, but in my opinion, the one thing that I would have changed, I never would have made them just straight up robots. I think that's the biggest detriment to this movie, because it just takes a little bit of life out of them. I still feel them, but the idea that they can just come back, you know, that's their thing, they can come back, but them being robots, just like, it just takes a little bit away from them. But I think the performances are all great. Specifically, in my opinion, I think Richard Madden's really good. He's such a credible, you know, so thought to be villain at the end of the movie. Like, I think he's very credible. And yeah, I really like this movie. It's shot incredibly well. I think that I'm biased, man.
No, you're good.
Being
you're
real
good.
Biased about this, but I think this movie's great. Number 8, I have Iron Man. It's the one that started it all. It's like the Bill Russell of this. You got to have it up there. Yeah, this movie, it's the first, and Robert Downey Jr. you want to talk about ascensions of a character, this is it. And he probably, in the history of this movie thing, when the world blows up at the end of time, he's going to be considered as, one of the most recognizable people in Hollywood because of this. So, it goes from that all the way to his death in Endgame, and then you even go further. It's like everything that he does still reverberates throughout the entire universe, and it's such a great setup. This movie's really raw too, which I appreciate, and that's just coming from, this is the first, so you're gonna approach the movie with not as much budget, but this movie I think looks really cool. I think Obadiah Stane, Jeff Bridges is pretty cool. Did it start the whole, you fight yourself trope in the MCU? Sure. But, I mean, at the end of the day, it's Robert Downey Jr.'s performance that propels this into the top 8 for me. Number 7 is Avengers Endgame. Again, we've said everything you need to say. We've never reviewed this movie in full, which we will eventually, probably before Secret Wars or Kang Dynasty, wherever it falls. But this movie is, it's everything. That third act is just, it's the crowning achievement in the most crowning achievement cinematic universe of all time. The logistics behind the camera in the studio is just insane that they pulled it off. And then to actually do it and actually make you feel something, I think is great. Number 6, right? On 6?
Yep.
Is Black Panther. And we already talked about as much as I needed to talk about with that.
Yeah. These look pretty, we're going to start looking the same at this point. Number 10, I have Guardians of the Galaxy 2. We're going to see how high I have Guardians 1, and I don't think Guardians 2 is that far of a step down. I think everybody across the board is good. Kurt Russell's a tremendous villain. Really, really great emotional performance from Chris Pratt, which I don't think people really thought he may have been capable of at this point. So he's really great in that. Number 9, I have Thor Ragnarok. Totally resuscitated the character, resuscitated Chris Hemsworth's love for the character, the perfect balance of comedy and action and seriousness. Cate Blanchett is really great as Hela. Good insertion of the Hulk, great introduction of Valkyrie. Yep. I just think this movie got it. And like you said, I think Love and Thunder just, he hung himself with too much rope.
Yeah, I think so too.
With Thor Love and Thunder. I think Ragnarok was the perfect storm of everything.
Because it's still kind of serious in there too. There's still a lot of serious and a lot of stakes in there too.
Yeah. Number 8, I have Black Panther. We're not going to relitigate all of our feelings about that. Just absolutely culturally transcendent as a film. Chadwick Boseman is just magnetic and universal acclaim for that film. Number 7, I have Iron Man 1. Again, it's the movie that started it all. Robert Downey Jr. Without that performance, without this movie, we don't get these 29 other films to talk about. The foundations of universe were built upon the back of this movie and upon Robert Downey Jr. And for that, along with it being a pretty damn great movie in its own right, I think that gets lost in the scope of it. But yeah, it is the originator. It is the first. It will always be in that top 10, no matter how long this universe goes for. Number 6, Avengers Endgame. It's fan service. The movie, it gives us all the feels. It gives us all these much deserved kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Conclusions to stories that we've been following for the 10 years prior. It's an impossible task to do. It's a satisfying conclusion to the back end of Infinity War. Brings everything to a head. Brings us all these characters together again. Has some great popcorn moments in it. It kind of invented the theater experience as a sporting event.
Yeah. Sorry, Martin.
Yeah. And man, it's really, really good. And then I'm just gonna roll right through. I'm gonna go 5 to 1. 5. I'm sure you've been wondering where Wakanda Forever is gonna end up on this list, and it's here for me. It's top 5. It's hit the Mount Rushmore. It's hit the Pantheon, however you want to call it. Will that change between now and when I see it again? It very may well. But again, I can't spoil too much about it because we're still non-spoiler. But Letitia Wright puts in I'm going to say an equally transcendent performance that Chadwick Boseman put into the first one. she's tremendous.
Yeah, some people are going to hear that and just lose it.
Yeah, but it's true. Yeah. And when you see it, I think you might come around to that. And so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it because like there's not a ton I can talk about. Number 4, Captain America: Civil War. I love the fact that they were able to make an Avengers movie, but still made Captain America the main character. It's a really interesting movie. It's a really great philosophical piece. There's a lot of layers to this movie that I don't think a lot of these other movies have. It's very grounded despite being set in a superhero universe, which I think is the strength of all the Captain America films. And this one hits incredible highs. It's obviously the introduction to Black Panther, and he's incredible in this. We talked about that already. And you know, the airport scene is iconic.
Yeah, you also got another big introduction in that movie.
Yeah, yep. And you get Zemo, you get the developing of the relationship between Wanda and the Vision. Yeah, which obviously is explored way further down the line. So number 3, I have Avengers: Infinity War. Again, talk about impossibility, talk about cinematic achievement. This is the one. This is the one. This is the culmination of everything that they've done. As much as you want to say Endgame was, this is where we really got to see all these different worlds collide. We had the Avengers, we had the Guardians of the Galaxy, we had the red hot Black Panther kind of lore get inserted into this. Everyone's at their best, everyone's in their A game, and still has the unassailable best villain in this universe that we've gotten. Josh Brolin's Thanos is just a menace. Yeah. He's the core of this movie. As much as it's about heroes and superheroes, the villain is ostensibly the main character. Yep. We get Thanos' point of view and instant tone setter with the beginning of the movie, and then obviously
smart.
One of the most harrowing endings to a superhero movie that you're ever gonna get. On the flip side of that, my number 2 movie is Guardians of the Galaxy 1. We've talked about this movie a bunch and why it's so high on both of our lists. Just this unexpected, when I walked out of the theater thinking it was the greatest movie I'd ever seen, and then I saw it again and again and again, and that feeling never changed. It's just lightning in a bottle. It's perfectly executed by James Gunn. It's the reason why you see James Gunn is at the forefront of all the things that he's at the forefront of now, is because he nailed this first Guardians of the Galaxy movie. It's tremendous. And the number 1 top of the pantheon is Captain America: The Winter Soldier. I think it's just the best front to back movie that they've done. Chris Evans is at his emotional best. Sebastian Stan puts in a very layered, if not reserved, performance as the Winter Soldier. We get the introduction of Anthony Mackie, who is now Captain America, and it's just, one of the most visually intriguing movies that they've done. It has the best hand-to-hand core action sequences that they've ever done. Yeah, it's unassailable to me right now. Will that change in the future? It might. I mean, they're still putting out movies, but for now, for quite some time, the 4 that I have been unassailable so far. So that top 4 is unassailable, and Wakanda Forever has inserted its way into my top 5.
Yep, a great list. I love that. Number 5, I have Civil War. Again, it's this idea that I can pick up a comic book and that's what it feels like. But again, at the other side of that is it being a Captain America movie, this being Chris Evans' story, and it being the crux of that and the grand crescendo to what his journey was and through the MCU. It's like, I love the point about it being very philosophical. It is it's a morality debate too, in this idea of jurisdictions, and it's kind of questioning the ideals. If Ultron was questioning the ideals of what, this superhero team should be, this is questioning the idea of, should they, where should they go and who should they help? And then just to kind of back end that with Zemo's argument and, having this regular human, be at the mercy of these heroes, it's really harrowing. And that airport scene is, it's gray, whatever. I don't care. It's your heroes are fighting. Like, you built this universe, like, they're going to have to fight at some point, and they fought. And, you feel every blow in that scene. You feel Spider-Man. Every punch. Spider-Man's in there. I'll never forget where I was. I was my senior year of high school. I was in one of the classrooms, and my friend came running in because, your senior don't got to do much. And it's ninth period. He comes running in, and he's just like, new Civil War trailer's out. And we're like, all right, let's all watch it. And there was like 15 of us watching it. And at the end, Spider-Man flips in, and we all just lost it. So that alone gives me some brownie points. But again, that introduction to Black Panther is just burned into my mind as one of the coolest things. that's where, as ever cool as Chadwick Boseman is, this is probably the coolest I think he's ever been, was in Civil War. He's just cold and calculated in this movie, and, you know, every bit. And I think one of the crowning achievements of the MCU is the third act of this movie, specifically that fight between
oh my god,
Cap, Iron Man, and Bucky is just, every punch means something, and there's so much weight. And then again, that old adage that one frame can tell 1,000 words. That the Iron Man, the reactor blast versus the shield is just, it's one of the greatest things they've ever done. Number 4, I have Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. I think this movie is absolutely incredible, masterfully directed, incredible score, the performances. I think this might be one of the best acted movies in this phase, if not the best acted movie in this entire franchise. Everybody brings their absolute A+ game, and it's one of those movies you're going to think about for a while, and, you know, it's a sad circumstance, but what's able to come from it is just truthfully incredible. Number 3 is Captain America: The Winter Soldier. This movie, it's like Shang-Chi. It slaps, man. This movie smacks. But I think what this movie understands is they were going so broad with what they were doing. Like, there was such this big, you know, world explorations, and the Avengers had just happened, and, you know, it was the Avengers, and then you went to Iron Man 3, and then you went to Thor 2, and then this movie needed to get, you know, a little bit more regular worldy, I think, and, you know, deal with the fallout a little bit. And it's just the jarring experience about everything, you know, being upended all like that. I think that's really great. This plays so well as a spy movie. I think that's my favorite aspect about it. Chris Evans is incredible. That last fight between him and Bucky, you feel it so much. And the action it's so tight. It's really tight. It's fast paced. And yeah, hats out to the Russo brothers for doing that. Speaking of the Russo brothers, I think the second greatest movie in this universe is Infinity War. It's incredible. It's nothing short. As a Thanos movie, this is how you do it. You still understand that that's a villain, but you let their debates speak them for themselves. You show, you don't tell. And yeah, it's this idea that Black Panther: Wakanda Forever gets. It's the relationships between people. So now you're weaving in everybody. You're having different pairings, which is cool. Like, this is truthfully a comic book brought to life. And you're just sitting there in awe of, you know, what's transpiring through this. Like, Iron Man standing next to Doctor Strange, who's standing next to Spider-Man, who's standing next to the Guardians of the Galaxy, and then there's the Black Panther with the Hulk, with Falcon. Like, all these different character pairings are incredible. And again, the last part of that movie is just, people were genuine depression happened at the end of this movie. It's just such a shared experience. And I think the greatest movie that they've ever done is the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie. It is the movie in this universe that means the most to me. I love this. I mean, we talked about it already. I absolutely thoroughly love this movie. I just, you know, I don't care about any of the flaws. I don't see them very much. This movie's got so much style. It's got charisma, but the most important thing, it's got so much heart. It's got the most heart, in my opinion. These frames speak so much for themselves, and that only comes through James Gunn.
There it is. We put it on the record now. Finally, all of them, 1 through 30.
Yeah,
it's on the record. We can't change it. It's in stone. It's done.
If you would have let me, I would have put 1A as Daredevil. But didn't happen.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to where Wakanda Forever ultimately opens up on other lists, other people's lists and rankings.
Yep, and we are in phase 5 of the MCU, and the next time that you'll hear from us in terms of the MCU, I think, you know, it's going to be a little bit of the Guardians holiday special, but, you know, big universe ideas. It will be the first time we see the tried and true Kang the Conqueror, Jonathan Majors, and I think for the next 3 years we're going to be in for an absolutely insane treat. Next 4 years.
Agreed.
Full presidential.
Yeah. But until then, you can follow us on Twitter at ProjectsINF_pod. You can follow us.
Will we be verified?
Maybe.
Who's to say?
You can follow us on Facebook. You can follow us on Instagram
at the Project Infinite Pod.
Thank you so much. We are looking forward to coming back next week for our full review of Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, because there is heaps that we have not been able to talk about. So much more to dive into as far as the performances and so much more, as well as looking forward to phase 5 and what that's going to look like. So yeah, that's it. What a film.
Yeah.
To tie it all back, to bring it all back to why we sat down, which was Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. Just unbelievable. Just you feel it from minute 1 to minute however long this goes. You feel it, and I'm telling you right now, the first 20 minutes and the final 10 minutes or so, you're going to feel it. You're going to feel it. It was tasteful. It was respectful. It was full of love, full of care. It couldn't have been in better hands as far as a cast, as far as a director. Everyone, like you said, brought their A+ game, and I couldn't be more happy with it. It was everything that I thought it was going to be, and so much more, is my final kind of stamp on it. So, any final thoughts?
Yeah, just rest in peace, Chadwick Boseman, and thank you.
Yeah. All right, guys. We'll see you next week for our full review. Goodbye.
Peace.